Hello everyone, my name is Zachary Ware, and today we're going to be discussing Predictably Irrational, written by Dan Ariely. In his book, Ariely puts forth primary research that he conducted across many groups, and how through organized thought, his predictions of the outcomes of the research were many times proven correct. In Chapter 1, we are introduced to the idea of relativity. To explain this concept, Ariely presents an example of purchasing a subscription to The Economist to a class of students at MIT. In this example, there are three possible choices for a subscription: internet only for $59, print only for $129, or an internet and print subscription for $129. The majority of the class, 84%, chose the combination internet and print subscription option. Ariely explains this outcome by stating that relative to a similar price, the person appears to be getting a better deal, which they are. To expand on this idea, Ariely gives a similar example with television sets. In this example, a person is selling television sets that are different brands and different sizes, so there's really nothing to use as a basis of comparison between the three sets. The prices increase as the size of the televisions increase. Here, with nothing to compare between the three televisions, Ariely says that a person is most likely to choose the middle option. By applying this idea, a person or company is able to sell more of a certain item simply by changing its price point and making it more difficult to compute the value of different, yet still somewhat similar options. Chapters 2 and 3 both deal more closely with the prices that we're willing to pay for commodities. Anchoring is a concept that the reader is introduced to that says a person makes associations, not always rational, for the prices of goods based on values we subconsciously associate with the good. An example used in the book is research done in the class at MIT, where Ariely held an auction for wine along with other items, where he asked the class to first write down the last two digits of their social security numbers before the bidding began. The results showed that students with social security numbers that fell between 80 and 99 bid on average 3 times higher than students whose social security numbers fell between 0 and 19. Ariely, amongst others, suggests that consumers use price anchoring similar to this in their everyday lives, whether it's when deciding on a price to pay for a house based on similar houses, or the price to pay for their cup of morning coffee. Similarly, in Chapter 3, the idea of zero or free actually being a price is brought up. One of the experiments done in this chapter had students purchasing a high-quality chocolate for 15 cents or a low-quality chocolate for a penny. A majority of students purchased the high-quality chocolate. However, when each price was lowered by a penny, making the lower-quality chocolate completely free, the majority of students chose the free chocolate instead, even though each item had an equal drop in price, which should yield identical results for the second round of the experiment. The students were willing to give up the high-quality chocolate in lieu of a free one. This experiment, amongst others, signals that an idea of a free price is one of the most powerful ways in which a consumer can be influenced. Chapter 4 delves into the concept of social versus market norms. Observed in this chapter, a person is more likely to volunteer their extra time than they are to accept payment for it. This is because people typically conceive accepting payment for their time as additional work, a market norm. An observation of market norms shows that people are more likely to seclude themselves from others, and additional monetary compensation is oftentimes a poor incentive to sway the person to do otherwise. To contrast this, in Chapter 5, it is observed that people are more willing to work with others and to spend excess amounts of cash when they are sexually aroused. Sexual arousal seems to mitigate the effects of market norms on individuals and skew preconceived ideas of how they would act in groups. Procrastination and self-control are topics that are discussed in Chapter 6. The idea behind procrastination is that when left to one's own volition and without the imposition of a set deadline, an individual will often delay completing a given task until the last possible minute. By doing this, an individual usually performs significantly worse than when someone who had strict deadlines to adhere to. Simply by providing a person or group with a set deadline, a task will typically be completed before the deadline nears and will be completed at a higher quality than without an imposed deadline. The value of a commodity to an individual increases after the commodity is acquired. In Chapter 7, the example of students waiting in line for tickets is given. The students who waited in line for days or even weeks and were lucky enough to receive their tickets said that they were willing to sell their tickets for nearly 10 times the amount willing to be paid by the students who waited in line and didn't receive the tickets. The idea here is that when we own something, we tend to value it significantly more than others, because people focus more so on what they might lose rather than the benefits of keeping the item. Two effects observed in this chapter, the IKEA effect and the eBay effect. The IKEA effect says that the more work an individual puts into something, the more ownership is felt for that item, raising the value to the person. The eBay effect says that a person begins to covet or feel ownership for an item even before the item is purchased. Chapter 8 discusses the effect that options have on individuals. A study was conducted where students played a computer game that awarded them money for choosing one of 3 doors. Each door awarded a different amount of money, and students were able to freely move between the doors, accumulating different amounts of money. Most students found the door with the highest reward and stayed there, accumulating the most amount of money possible. When told that a door would disappear if not used regularly, however, students were more inclined to switch between the doors with a higher frequency, lowering the amount of money they received. Even though the students were aware of the door that would yield them with the highest reward, students were willing to sacrifice their money simply to retain other options. People will often expend time, effort, and capital in order to keep unnecessary options readily available, despite the fact that they will most likely never be used, or are not ideal to use. Chapters 9 and 10 both deal with how a person perceives a purchase. An experiment was conducted where students were given 2 free beers, one normal and another with a small amount of balsamic vinegar added. In a blind taste test, students chose the beer with the vinegar in it over the regular beer, but when the students knew about the vinegar before tasting the beers, the students would almost always choose the regular beer. Another experiment was held, this time involving a placebo painkiller, Veladone RX. The placebo drug was sold by an attractive saleswoman to students. When it was sold at a price of $2.50 per dosage, all students would report that their pain was completely alleviated within 10 minutes. But when the drug was sold at a discounted 10 cents per dosage, only 50% of students reported feeling better. These observations show us that previously held experiences can cloud our point of view, and that when a person pays more for an item, they will oftentimes receive a better experience from the item, even though there is no reason for it. Both chapters 11 and 12 discuss dishonesty. Chapter 11 states that a person is more likely to be dishonest and cheat or steal when the transgression is low and not dealing with money. An example of this would be stealing a pencil versus stealing 10 cents to purchase a pencil. Even though the two are economically identical, a person would be more inclined to take the pencil rather than the money. Conversely, when dealing with cash equivalents such as tokens that can be redeemed for cash, it would be assumed that a person would be less likely to be dishonest, just like with the cash. This assumption, however, is false. When faced with cash equivalent items like this, a person tends to be just as dishonest as they would be in the pencil scenario, again, despite the two being economically identical. Chapter 13 surmises the ideas and lessons discussed throughout the entire book by simply saying that people are irrational but not random, that they are systematic and predictable.